The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Fastpath Assure Release 2018-1 webinar. We're going to go through some of the new features that are included and some others that are options for you. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We're going to record this, so if you want to share it with anyone on your team, you'll get a link afterwards. We are going to leave everyone on mute while Zach's presenting, but you can feel free during the session to type your questions in the chat or question box, and then at the end, we'll go through the questions for you. Just a few little did you knows. As a Fastpath customer, all your training and support is included, so if you feel like your team needs a little bit more training, just go ahead and reach out to us. The best way to submit a support request is through support.fastpathassure.com. And if you're not familiar with it yet, we have our NetSuite Security and Audit Field Manual. It's available on Amazon, but if you would like a copy for yourself, you can always email us at gina@gofastpath.com, and we'll go ahead and get a copy mailed out to you. I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Zach Weir on our team, and Zach will go ahead and walk you through what's new. So, Zach.
All right, thanks, Trish.
Sure.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So as Trish said, we're just going to be walking through some of the new features that are available in our latest release of 2018.1. So let me get my slideshow up and running here. So just the agenda for today, we're mainly just going to focus on what was released or what came out in this last release, and then have some time for a Q&A at the end. I know we booked off an entire hour for this webinar, but most likely we're not going to need anywhere near that, so you'll get back some of your afternoon. And then just a quick note, something that's not on the agenda here with regards to this last release. If you missed it in the notifications that went out, as a part of this last release, we had to create a new Fastpath Assure bundle out in NetSuite. So if you have the old bundle installed in your NetSuite account, that bundle is no longer going to be used going forward, and you'll have to uninstall and reinstall the new 2018.1 version. We don't anticipate having to do this going forward and hoping to get back to just the regular updates of the bundle for each release, but just something to be aware of as you go out and update your Fastpath Assure instance. All right, so let's dive into the new modules. So the big new module that came out this release is Access Certifications. So Access Certifications kind of acts as a component of access reviews and segregation of duties. So in the past with those modules, in order to schedule review and feedback collection of the various reports that are available in those modules, you would need to actually go in and schedule individual reports to send them out to users, and then we kind of left it up to you to manage the review and feedback collection processes. Now with the Access Certifications module, we're going to try to automate that process for you. So with Access Certifications, you are going to be able to go out and actually schedule users to review specific components of the data that's available within Access Reviews and segregation of duties, and then automate sending out that data to those users, as well as collecting the feedback and then the ability to review the results of those reviews. So with that, what we're going to do is dive back into the product. We're going to take a quick peek at this module in action. All right, so now we're in a demo instance of Fastpath Assure. You see the shiny new Access Certifications module on the left-hand side. So the first step with Access Certifications is going to be just standard configuration. So we'll go into the configuration page and walk through what each of these mean here. So the first one at the top, this is just going to be the time of day that we're going to process your review schedules. So, and we'll talk about review schedules in a minute, but when we send those out to users to let them know that, hey, you have a new piece of data that you need to review within Fastpath Assure, this is going to be the time that's going to determine when those get sent out. And then you can also set the amount of time that a user has to review one of those assignments. So when they get the initial email that says, hey, you need to review this conflict data from Fastpath Assure, you can say, they have X number of days in order to complete that review. So they'll get notifications the day before it's due, the day it's due, and then also when it becomes overdue. So potentially 4 notifications, one for the new review, day before, day of due, and then overdue. And then the select all functionality, you'll see when we go and actually perform one of these reviews, when you go through and check off individual review items, you can turn it on so you can just rubber stamp and say, hey, this all looks good, or you can force your users to go through each individual item within that review. The security object inclusion in business process as well as critical access reviews. So if you set up a review assignment for a critical access group, currently, without this turned on, you'll just get the review, and the review items themselves will be the users that have access to a critical access group. Business process doesn't currently apply to NetSuite users, so I'm kind of glossing over that one. But if you turn this on, then you'll not only see the users, but you'll also see the individual security objects, so those NetSuite permissions that those users have access to within the critical access group. And then this last one, when you do conflict reviews, you can say whether or not you want to bring all conflicts into the review, or only those conflicts that do not currently have a mitigation assigned or documented against them. And then supervisor reviews, we'll cover here in just a little bit. All right, so that's the configuration. So the first step after setting up this configuration is actually determining who's going to have to review this data within Fastpath. So we do that by going to the review assignments page. From here, you're going to click the green plus to create a new review assignment. And the first thing you want to do is set the type. So there's 5 different types of review assignments you can create. Again, business process doesn't relate to NetSuite at this time. Conflict, so that's just going to be determining who has to review user conflicts within the system. Critical access groups, so that's going to be who has access to critical access groups. Product, so if you just have NetSuite in your Fastpath environment, that's just going to be all the users have access to NetSuite. But if you have multiple systems, you can actually assign users to review access to each of those products. And then you can also do this by role. So let's just do one by role here real quick. So I could say for role, I want to look at NetSuite, and I want anybody who has the accountant role, I want it to be reviewed by Zach Messerschmidt. You'll notice here that there's a drop down where you can select a single role. So if you do actually need to create or have a user or reviewer look at multiple roles, currently the solution is just to create multiple review assignments. That may change in the future when we add enhancements to this module down the road, but currently you just have to create multiple review assignments. So if we look back at the reviews I've created here so far and just kind of sum up what we have, so I'm saying that for my bills and items conflict, Zach Weir is going to review that. Vendors and purchase order is also going to be reviewed by Zach Weir. And then I have a product review for Salesforce, again, Zach. And then the CEO role, which is a NetSuite role. Zach's going to review the users have access to it. So once those review assignments are set up, the next step is determining when these reviews are going to take place. And that's done with the review schedules. So we dive into review schedules. You can create 2 different kinds of schedules for each type of review. So you can create a full as well as a rolling review. Now the full is going to be everything. So if we take it as an example here, conflict, I have a full review set up on a yearly basis. That's going to bring back all of the user conflicts. And again, it's going to be based on the review assignment. So if we look back at that one review assignment, I had a single conflict that I was going to be reviewing. A full review is going to bring back every user that has that conflict every time this review schedule runs. Now rolling is going to work a little bit differently. It's going to bring back the new users that have access based on the last time you ran a full plus all the rollings in between. So if I have a full review of conflicts and I have 500 users that have a given conflict, if I run a rolling right after that and we haven't added any new users to the system, there's not going to be anything to review in that rolling. But if we've created new users which are going to have that conflict, at that point they would show up in that rolling review. And then when we perform another rolling review, typically you'll see the full on a yearly and rolling on quarterly, monthly, maybe weekly. You'll see only the new users since the last rolling plus full. So those are the schedules. Again, you can set up both the full and rolling, and you can do that for each of the review types. Once these have been set up and these reviews have been run according to those schedules, the users that you've identified via the review assignments will get those emails letting them know that they have a new review to look at. And those reviews will be available under the My Reviews page. So we've gone ahead and run the review schedules for our conflict as well as role assignments. So since I'm assigned some of those reviews, I've got them showing up in My Reviews. I was assigned multiple conflicts. So again, creating those multiple review assignments for a single user and a single review type is how you get those multiple review items to show up. So you can see as we go through and actually review one of these, so I've got my conflict review, I'm assigned to review bills and items. You can go through and it's just going to show you, here's all the users that have that conflict in each company. And you can go through, and if you have select all turned on, you're going to have this option at the top where you just say all of them are good. Or you can go through individually, toggle them, either reject them, and if you reject them, you can enter notes or exceptions that might apply, or just toggle them on good. And it's going to be the same for each conflict that you have in here. And it's going to keep track of how many you have left. You can see with my role review here, so again, it's just going to be by who has that role. We just have one user in this case as the CEO role. Once that's completed, you're going to have the option to submit that review. When we go to submit, any optional notes that might be attached to it, click submit and that'll lock that review down. And at that point, it'll just be available for review on the all reviews page as well as within some reports that I'll show here in a minute. So that's the collection process. So reviewing those results can be done in a couple different ways. One is going to be the all reviews page. So this is going to have all of the reviews that are either basically just all the reviews that have been generated. And then you can see the status of whether they're in progress or not started or completed, which means they've actually been submitted. And then the same thing here. So I can click into one of those reviews. It's going to give me all of the users who were required to review those, and then the individual review items as well. So in this case, I was reviewing access to a product, which was Salesforce. You can see the individual users have access to that and what my results were. So whether I accepted that or rejected, and then the notes that should pop up if I had rejected that review item. The other way you can look at this is from the review history reports. So review history is just going to show you for each review schedule that we've done. It's going to show you when it was generated, how many reviewers that were assigned to it, the type, so full or rolling, the status, so if anybody's gone out and actually started on those reviews, it'll show up as in progress, otherwise not started, and then when that review is due as well. The review history detailed is actually going to dive in and show you the individual reviewers within, as well as how many items they've reviewed and how many they've rejected. Additionally, one thing I forgot on the all reviews page, you can export these out. So if I need to go in, I don't want to click through and see each of these items, I can just export it out and it'll be in an Excel document that makes it very easy to look through. From there, the last item here is supervisor assignments. So back on the review assignments, you can assign those to a specific Fastpath user. With supervisor assignments, you can actually filter down further what data a user will have to review within a given review type. Now to start off with supervisor assignments, we go back to the configuration page. You have to toggle these on, and then you can decide for each of the review types how the supervisor or which ones will actually be required to be reviewed by supervisors. Once we've toggled those on and created some schedules, to determine who the supervisors are or what that hierarchy is done from the supervisor assignments page. Now to do this, you'll have to export out, which will just export out an Excel file. It's going to give you a list of all the Fastpath users, as well as a list of all of your system users, so basically your NetSuite users. And from there, a third tab where you can actually configure who is assigned to review what. So for example, myself being logged in here as Zach Weir, if I was assigned 5 NetSuite users, when I get my conflict review, and I'm assigned, in this case, we go back to my review assignments, I'm assigned these 2 conflicts, bills and items and vendors and purchase orders. As opposed to looking at all the users, I'm only going to have to review the users that I've been assigned on the supervisor assignments page. So it kind of helps you filter that down for each of your users a little bit further. All right, so that's access certifications. So let's pop back into our PowerPoint. The next new feature that was included in this next release, or this last release, was the universal product integration. So with the universal product integration, this gives you the ability to bring in data from systems that we don't have a pre-built connector for. So like NetSuite, for example, we have the pre-built automated connector. If you have some systems that you'd like to include in the scope of your review that we don't have that connector built for, you can use this universal product integration in order to do so. Now, what this does at a high level is we give you a template database, which can be stored on a Microsoft SQL server, either on one of your own servers in-house or in Microsoft's Azure cloud. You need to populate that template database with the users as well as security information from the system that you're going to be reviewing. And then we can pull that data into Fastpath Assure either via direct SQL connection or via the hybrid SQL connector, which is an Azure product. From there, once that data is brought in, the access reviews as well as the segregation of duties modules will support that custom product, and you'll have the ability to do cross-platform analysis between any other systems you have installed within Fastpath Assure. So this is something that does require an additional license. So if it's something you're interested in, be sure to either reach out to myself or support@gofastpath.com. So next, updates on the segregation of duties module. So default mitigation conditions. So if you're not familiar with what default mitigation conditions are, let me actually pop back into the system here. Default mitigation conditions allow you to fine-tune how default mitigations are applied. So if we look at an example here, one of our accounting preferences and bills conflicts, if we were to turn on default mitigations, the conditions themselves are actually specified at the security object level. So what we can do here is we can say, I only want to apply this default mitigation if, in this case, the bill's security object is being obtained from a specific NetSuite role. So I could say only mitigate this if they're receiving the bills object from the AP clerk role. Now, if they have an additional role on top of this, say I also had access to bills from AR clerk, in this case, we would not mitigate. So when we go and apply those mitigations, we still look to see if there is a role that's overriding and providing additional access on top of this. So at a high level, that's what mitigations do. This feature has existed in the product for a few releases. Our last release just enhanced this feature. So before, when you would run some reports within the SOD module, so specifically the NetSuite individual role conflicts report, this has a default mitigation column that'll say true or false. In the past, this would say true or false just based on whether a default mitigation was attached to the conflict itself. Now, this will actually take into effect the conditions that have been applied to that default mitigation as well. And this will be applied not just to this report, but any of the SOD reports that have a default mitigation column throughout the system. Next, a couple of updates for the NetSuite Security Designer. So now we give you the ability to reprocess one of your security models. So if for whatever reason it gets stuck in a processing state via the context menu for the given security model, you'll have the ability to reprocess. And you'll also have the ability to export to Excel. So a while back we had the feature to export, which was somewhat limited. It spit out a PDF file containing really just the summary information about the given model. Now the export is going to be an Excel file with multiple tabs that's going to give you all of the information that's available through the user interface, including all of the user conflicts as well as role conflicts. Next is Identity Manager. So a few updates here. First one, the detailed risk analysis. So again, we can jump back into the application here. Now with the detailed risk analysis, if you remember previously, we'll actually go through and we'll create a new user here. Previously in versions of the risk analysis, you would just see a given user conflict that might be generated. Now with the detailed version, if I can get my password typed in. With the detailed version, you'll be able to see also the roles that are causing that conflict, as well as the individual objects within that conflict. So if we go look at our user conflicts here, so you'll notice this little arrow on the left-hand side. So we can see that by adding these two roles to a user, I would have conflict 16078 added as a result. Now, if we hit that drop-down, we're going to see the roles on this request that are actually leading to that conflict along with the individual security objects. So you can see AR clerk is solely responsible for this conflict. Not sure if we'll be able to find, so AP clerk in this case, I'm not sure if we'll be able to find one that goes across roles, but essentially it's just going to give you more information to determine what modifications you may need to make to this request in order to fix that conflict. Export request details. So when you go to the request details page, there's just a new button at the top where you can export that request out to PDF. It's going to be the same PDF that you see in the notification that's sent out to users to let them know that a new identity manager request was created. The configurable termination option. So this is a NetSuite specific item. So now when you go and create terminate requests, you can actually determine how that request is going to be processed into NetSuite. Well, again, we'll jump back to the application. Now if we go to setup configuration, if we go to the identity manager tab down at the bottom, there's a new section for terminate request processing. So by default, in the past, when we would process a terminate request, all we would do is set the inactive flag to yes in NetSuite. And that's going to be the default option here for the processing action. Now, instead, you can actually just choose to remove access. So that employee would still remain active in NetSuite. We just go through and remove all the roles and global permissions assigned and uncheck the give access box. So they'll no longer be able to log in to NetSuite, but that employee record will remain. And then you can also choose to set the release date. So release date is just a standard field within NetSuite on the employee record. If you toggle this on, when we go process that terminate, we'll set that release date to the date that that terminate was processed. Additionally, another update that I don't think was included in the release notes is on Identity Manager, you can now create modify requests that just remove all the roles from that user. So previously, if you tried to remove all roles, we wouldn't let you create that modify request. Now, if you process that through and a user has 0 roles as a result of the modify, we'll remove all those roles in NetSuite and we'll also uncheck that give access box. All right, moving on. So other enhancements, these are pretty straightforward. In the audit trail module, if you're using that module, on the NetSuite data changes report, we've added additional criteria there where you can filter this down by multiple users at once. Previously, this was just this was an in-grid filter that you could do, which limited you to just single users at a time. So you can now use this to filter it down by groups of users. And then additionally on the integrations, on the connections page specifically within the integrations module, for the NetSuite connection, you'll notice that the sandbox toggle is gone. So the reason for that is NetSuite's moving, they're moving away from the sandbox domain entirely, and eventually all of NetSuite accounts will be in one domain, so it'll just be system.netsuite.com or whatever data center applies to your business or your instance of NetSuite, and all the sandboxes will be in there as well. So to kind of mirror that functionality, we've removed that toggle, and now we dynamically discover whether or not it's a sandbox environment based on the account and the token key and secret that you input into Fastpath Assure. So we still support those connections to NetSuite sandboxes. We've just tried to make that process a little more straightforward. All right, so like I said, definitely not going to need the full hour. Pretty short. So at this point, we can open it up to questions. I'll take a look at any questions that have been entered, and then also my email is on here. So any questions that you don't want to ask during the webinar, feel free to shoot me an email directly, and we'll get those answered. Okay. Does Fastpath support SSO? SSO is on a specific platform. So currently we support SSO just with Microsoft, so Azure AD. We are expanding that and trying to add additional SSO providers. We don't currently support the provider that you've outlined in that specific question, but that's certainly something I can take back to our team and get that added to the list. So the Azure AD integration, so when you log into Fastpath, you'll see the standard username and password that you can enter. And then you can also click a button at the top that says Microsoft account. So that requires you already have an Azure AD account set up. And then you also have to have a Fastpath user that is marked as a Microsoft user. So let me go back into the application real quick on that one. So if you go to your users, you see there's actually two types right now. There's a Fastpath user as well as a Microsoft user. So when you set up that Fastpath user, they have to be designated as a Microsoft account in order to use that SSO. Next question. You schedule a review for admin users in NetSuite or admin roles. Yeah, so that's a known gap right now. So if we go back to the review assignments, so what this is referring to is when I say I want to review NetSuite roles, administrator and full access are missing from this list. That's something that we're working on getting fixed and hope to have that hot fixed prior to our next release. So sometime probably within the next week or so. So it'll be the same thing. You'll see administrator or full access show up here and you'll be able to choose those roles from the drop down when creating those review schedules. Next question, can you download the SOD results along with the conflicting roles details? I'm not sure if I know specifically what you're referring to there. Can you clarify that one a little bit? Is that with regards to Identity Manager in the request? Okay, yeah. So it looks like that is with regards to the Identity Manager request. So right now, those are not included in the PDF download. They're just available within the UI. So we're going to be looking at ways to get those into the export, but right now, just available in the user interface. And then for the termination, can we have both options of setting to inactive and removing access? That's a good question. Not right now, that's not an option, but that's certainly something we can look at. So what this is referring to is when you do set a user to inactive, the role assignments still exist. So if you go back and uncheck the inactive box on that employee, they'll have access to NetSuite again with the same roles they had before. That's what this question is referring to. I like that recommendation. So that'll be something that will get added to the roadmap here, is the ability to do both with regards to a termination option. Now that we got the framework there for supporting those options, I don't see that being anything that would be a problem to add. All right, I think that is all the questions at this point. So Maddie, I don't know if you have any last words prior to ending the rest of this webinar, but I think that does it for me.
Maybe Maddie's on mute, but thank you everybody for coming today. We appreciate it, and we'll be sure to send out the recording.
All right, thanks a lot, everybody.